In the lively city of Abuja, Rose's salon, Shades of Elegance, was a hidden gem. 30, Rose had built a reputation for transforming even the most lackluster wigs into dazzling crowns of beauty. Clients flocked to her not just for her skill, but for the comforting, homey atmosphere she created. There was, however, one peculiar detail that set her salon apart. It lacked a single mirror. As strange as it sounded, Rose had grown up with a grandmother who believed mirrors could attract spirits or serve as windows for energies to travel through. Rose, raised on stories of superstition and mystique, held on to that belief, and over the years it became her silent ritual. Clients grew to trust her and often left her salon with joyous expressions upon seeing their transformations only once they were home. One evening, when the skies grew dark and heavy with rain, Rose was preparing to close up the salon. She hummed to herself, tidying the tools and brushes, when she heard the faint jingle of the front doorbell. She glanced up, surprised. Most people avoided visiting so late, especially with the rain pouring down. Standing in the doorway was a woman unlike any client Rose had ever seen. She was in her early 40s, with a warm, round face and a figure wrapped in a flowing yellow dress. Her eyes held a strange intensity, an unearthly gleam that made Rose momentarily lose her breath. She introduced herself as Betty and, with a strange gentleness, pulled an old, faded wig from her handbag. "Could you make this beautiful again?" Betty's voice was soft yet firm, and her gaze unwavering. "It belonged to my sister, who passed away. I want it to feel new, like it did when she wore it." The wig was indeed aged but rich in quality, a relic of beauty. Rose's fingers itched to restore it, and she nodded, assuring Betty that she'd handle it with the utmost care. Betty gave her a peculiar smile, eyes flickering toward the door. "Before I come in, you don't have any mirrors here, do you?" she asked suddenly, her gaze intense. "No," Rose answered, startled by the question. "I don't keep mirrors in the salon. I just prefer it that way." Betty's face softened, her eyes gleaming with something that looked like relief. She stepped into the salon, settling into the chair and watching as Rose carefully examined the wig. As they chatted, Rose felt a strange connection to her, as though Betty were an old friend rather than a stranger. When the appointment ended, Betty handed Rose a neatly folded piece of paper with an address written in flowing handwriting. She asked Rose to bring the wig to her there once it was ready. "Just knock," Betty instructed, her voice soft but her eyes solemn. "I'll be there to answer." The next day, Rose poured all her energy into restoring the wig. She combed, brushed, and styled it with precision, adding layers and a touch of color to bring it back to life. The work took hours, but by the time Rose finished, the wig gleamed with a renewed beauty. She felt a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, as though she'd breathed new life into a forgotten treasure. When evening arrived, Rose hired a cab to take her to Betty's address. The cab driver, David, was a talkative man, but Rose, feeling a strange unease, sat quietly, her thoughts swirling with memories of Betty's unusual mannerisms and the sense of tranquility she'd felt in her presence. She was oddly apprehensive, her heart beating faster as they neared the destination. The address led them to an old but well-maintained bungalow tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Rose approached the gate with the boxed wig in hand, hesitating for a moment before knocking. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the sound of crickets and distant thunder. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with silver hair and weary eyes. She looked at Rose with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hello," Rose began, holding up the box. "I'm here to deliver a wig for Betty. She asked me to bring it here." The woman's expression changed instantly, her face turning pale as her hand flew to her chest. "Betty," she whispered, her voice trembling with shock. "Betty, she's been dead for 3 years." Rose froze, her heart pounding. She stammered, "No, that can't be. She was in my salon just yesterday, asking me to revamp this wig." The old woman's eyes filled with sadness and disbelief as she shook her head slowly. "You must be mistaken. Betty was my daughter. She loved that wig, but she passed away 3 years ago in an accident. She was buried in that yellow dress." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. Her mind raced, recalling Betty's strange request about the mirrors and the way she'd seemed almost relieved to find none. She looked down at the box in her hands, realizing the weight of what she was holding. The elderly woman placed a trembling hand on Rose's shoulder. "You're not the first," she murmured, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Sometimes when someone loves something deeply, they leave a part of themselves with it. Betty, she never truly left that wig behind. As the full realization dawned on her, Rose felt her legs weaken and she stumbled back in terror, her fingers loosening around the box until it fell to the ground, the wig spilling out onto the doorstep. David, who had been watching from the cab, had witnessed Rose's shock and saw the fear in her eyes. "Rose, let's get out of here," he yelled, his voice filled with alarm. Without a second thought, Rose turned and sprinted to the cab, her heart racing as she climbed in beside him. David, his face pale with fear, hit the gas and they sped away, leaving the wig glinting under the dim porch light. Neither of them spoke during the drive back, their minds too overwhelmed to process what they had just experienced. That night, Rose lay awake, replaying the encounter over and over in her mind. Her hands shook as she remembered the feel of the wig, the warmth of Betty's presence, and the cold realization of her ghostly request. She couldn't shake the eerie sensation that lingered, as though Betty were still watching, still waiting. From that day forward, Rose made a small change in her salon. She brought in a single, modest mirror, placing it near the entrance. It was a silent tribute to Betty, a reminder of the woman who had loved her sister's memory so fiercely that she'd crossed the boundaries between life and death. And every now and then, when the salon was empty and the night was quiet, Rose would catch a glimpse of something in the mirror, a flash of yellow, a warm smile, and the ghostly figure of a woman watching over her beloved wig from the other side. What do you guys think about this folktale? Please support me by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing. See you guys in the next one. Thank you.